Okay, so good evening everyone, right? So I hope you remember that what exactly we have done in the last class. So basically, we started with the first topic, but then there was so much in general discussion what we had in the last class, and that's why we could not finish this particular chapter. So today's target is that we have to finish the sources as a topic. So, since you know that this is the first topic that you have to cover, and in fact in the last class what we did, we understood some of the general things, but at the same time we also fixed that what are the dimensions from where the questions may be asked from this particular topic. So we will just try to cover all those sources in today's class. That's target number one. And as there are certain other features which are part of it, such as as I told you that I'll be providing you some probable questions, and at least we'll try to learn how to do the framing of at least one question, and then the rest of the questions would be practiced by you, right? So you just merge all of these things as part of this advanced program, or let's say A to Z program, and that's how we're going to proceed, correct? So let us start with the first topic, and that is the sources, and among the sources, as I did tell you, that first of all, the question which is quite probable is the Vedas as a source of history. Acha, one more suggestion that I'll be giving you. Now, how we are going to follow this particular course, that's also very important. Though I'll be providing you some PDF support, what you have already got, correct? But then apart from this also, there are many new ideas that maybe we'll be discussing in the class. Maybe there are certain new points that I'll be discussing in the class. So that's how there are many supplementary information that might come in the class, and that's how the classes are important. Otherwise these PDF materials would have been sufficient. But then as I'm telling you that certain other information that we'll be discussing in the class itself, and that's why you have to keep in mind that for every topic at least 1 or 2 pages that will be preparing in the class itself, and after that we'll be clubbing this material what we have been providing to you, along with that sheet of paper that you have prepared within the class itself, correct? Because some supplementary or additional information, some discussions, right, they are definitely going to take place which are somehow getting the extra information or the additional information, correct? So okay, the first topic that we are going to cover in today's class is the Vedas as a source of history. Now I don't need to define the Vedas, you all understand that there were 4 Vedas, but then let me give you a new information that in the recent times there is a new debate which is going on in history, and as per that it is considered, or it is there in the question, that whether Atharva Veda should be considered as the Veda or not. So there are so many scholars now, they have started saying Atharva Veda is not part of the Vedas, or it's not part of that list of the Vedas, rather it should be kept outside of the Vedas. So there were many scholars, they have started suggesting that there are only 3 Vedas, right? So this is one extra information that you can use somewhere in the either introduction or even in conclusion also. Now why is so? Because I hope if you have studied history, in that case you all must be aware of one fact, that as far as Atharva Veda is concerned, that's considered as the non-Aryan Veda. Why non-Aryan Veda? Because there were so many concepts which are inherent in the Atharva Veda, which are not precisely talking about the Vedic culture, rather it is more talking about the indigenous culture. And why indigenous culture? Because it shows the integration of Aryans with the non-Aryans, and that's how probably their concepts were somehow taken into the Vedic culture, and a Veda was constructed, or Veda was composed, and which is which is somehow discussing about the non-Aryan cultures, and that's how it was called as. Earlier also it was called as non-Aryan Veda, and probably the new kind of history which is coming into existence these days, that's how it has been avoiding it. So as it is an additional information that you can use anywhere in the introduction or the conclusion, right? So roughly speaking, the Vedas are considered to be the source which were somehow created between 1500 to 600 BC. Though it is written 500, but this is again a new concept, so you can either write 500 or /600 BC, that is quite fine. Now as I did tell you that whenever we have to identify whenever we have to fix that what sort of information we have been getting from the Vedas or any source, for that matter, ultimately we have to divide it into couple of categories, and that's how we have to see it, fine? So first of all, the information that we have been that we can discuss, that cultural and the religious insight. Since Vedas are the precisely religious texts, and that's how we do get a very good information of the culture and the religion. Now what example? As I told you that in the exam, whenever you have been writing any point, that must be associated with some examples that you can somehow put forward your idea in a very concrete way. So let's say deities and the rituals. You all know that ultimately all these deities and the rituals are being mentioned, and in fact in the examples we can write about the Vedas, the way they have been discussing about the various rituals such as Asumeg or the Vajpayee Yajnas, and that's how we find the information about that, right? Then it comes to further social structure. Now this is again very important, like source of information for us. Why? Because Vedas are telling us about the various transformations happening in the society. So in fact you can use here a word transformation as well, like that the way it shows the transformation coming from early Vedic to later Vedic period. The way initially the institutions like Varna was not mentioned, later it is mentioned. The institution like Gotra not mentioned in early Rig Veda, but it is mentioned. So that's how we can talk about this particular transition. In the similar fashion, we can talk about the transition even in the political insight from the Vedas also. Now in political insights, such as when you talk about the kingship, that is one of the most important concept with respect to the ruler or with respect to the political information. So of course the kingship was discussed in early Vedic period, Rig Veda, but then this discussion over the kingship is very is in a very primitive form, right? It is just talking about a Rajan, and in fact this person does not enjoy any sort of power. But the moment you go into the later Vedic period, in that case you start finding certain information on the political thing, such as you find now the king and the various terms like Samrat, Chakravartin, Virat, Ekrat, Swarat. These kind of various terms are being used, and that's how we can say. And apart from that, the way we find the discussion over the Bali and all, right? So on the basis of that we can say, and then of course certain institutions also you can mention, such as Sabha, Samiti, Vidat and Gan. So these are the political institutions. So that's how we can say they are even giving us some insight over it, correct? So that's how we can say that these are various informations political informations which are there. Then it comes to economic aspects. Now again, when it comes to the economic aspect, I must tell you that again the transformation, or let's say the transition, is depicted here as well, right? Normally the early Vedic the early Vedic period is considered to be a period which is having a very nomadic or pastoralist economy. But the moment it enters into the later Vedic period, you know that agriculture is being flourished. And in fact, that you should that you should somehow try to prove with the help of example, such as here I have used the Athar Veda. Now Athar Veda is actually mentioning about the various references of the agricultural practices. In fact, it does discuss about the various steps, various stages of the agricultural practices, and that's how we do get a very good information, right, on this. Undoubtedly, informations are here slightly less. Why it's less? Because ultimately in exam we need to write just one point. So it has been prepared with that particular mindset only. But then certain explanation I had been already giving you, right? So okay, these are the various information. So we have covered the political, we have covered economic, we have covered social, and then religious also. So most of these are the four aspects that we should cover, right? Then it comes to the most important part, that what are the limitations. So it's not necessary that the question is being asked, let's say only one dimension, or a simple question has been asked to you which is simply asking you to write a note on the Vedas as a source of history. They are not going to ask the question in this manner. So maybe somewhere it is highlighting, or somewhere it is asking you to highlight the positive part of it as a source of Veda. Somewhere it is asking you to highlight the negative aspects or the basically criticism of it as a source of history. So it depends on the question. But then yes, we can talk about certain limitations also. Now in the limitations, some limitations are as such as ultimately they are religious in nature, the Vedas, right? So this is one of the most important problem. At any point of time, the Vedas were not written as a history book. There are certain scholars, they have been considering the Vedas as history book, then actually it was not. You all know that it was precisely a religious text, and it is giving some indirect references of the other things such as polity, economy, society and other sort of thing. And that's how we can say it precisely remain as religious or mythological in nature, correct? Now the second problem is the chronological ambiguity, right? That I would like to discuss a little bit, and then I'll move forward. Okay, fine. Now what is the chronology, right? Look, whenever we have been evaluating any source, correct? And in fact, its utility in history writing, its utility in history writing. There are some in general suggestions that I have been giving you, so just keep it in your mind very carefully. Now, history is always interested in couple of things. They are core part of history. And do you know what are these core part of history? Among them, there is one which is very important, and that is time. Correct? Without referring the time, you can't narrate the events. You can't talk about the various events which were taking place. Now you will be saying ki, what is the significance of time? It does not matter. No, time does matter. Let me tell you, if in the modern times, right? If in the modern times, if we are talking about patriarchy, is it correct? Can we discuss about patriarchy? Can we say that patriarchy is correct in the modern times? No. But then if somebody is talking about patriarchy, is there something wrong in that? Well, of course it is wrong. But then you should understand that the idea, that liberal idea, whether the gender differences were basically resolved or they were removed, that's basically a modern idea. Why? Because once the liberalism comes in and then it was realized that the women are equally, equally, they're having equal potential, or let's say they're equally talented, then you are saying, no, actually it is incorrect, the women are equally talented. So I think you all can understand if somebody is talking about that kind of gender relationship in the ancient times, that is quite okay. But if somebody is talking about the gender relationship in the modern times in this way, in that case it is problematic. So I hope you can understand how come time is one thing which is changing our understanding of anything. Let me give you one example also. What Buddha was saying at that point of time, if the women are joining the Sanghas, in that case the Buddhism is going to survive just for 500 years, and if they would not have joined, in that case Buddhism must have survived more than 1,000 years, correct? Now this is quite valid point at that point of time. Why? Because at that point of time society had been treating the woman as the other gender, correct? So since the women were being treated as the other gender, even though you are not supposed to see the negative part of Buddha, rather you should see the positive part of Buddha, that though he also knew that what is the general perception for the woman in the society, even though he allowed the woman to join the Sangha, correct? But then if you have been criticizing Buddha by saying this, this person was not a very enlightened fellow. Why? Because he was not seeing the woman with the proper perspective, not giving the proper respect to the woman. That would be unfair to say. That's the significance of time, correct? So if if the fundamental rights are not being followed in the ancient times, you can't question over it, right? But if it is not being followed in the modern times, you can question over it, correct? So that's how time is very important in history, and that's the reason because of what I always suggest my students to write about the either centuries or the decades, or if possible in the modern, write the year. Why? Because without referring the time, you can't convey the proper history to the people, and that's the significance of time. So I hope you can understand that time does play a very important role. But then this is one general problem with the Vedas. Vedas are not very particular about the time. Nowhere in the Vedas it is written okay, the period is from 1500 BC to 1000 BC where the Rig Veda is being composed. From 1000 to 600 BC when the rest of the three Vedas are being composed. They are not giving this, right? So in that case we actually do not know that whether they were being exactly in which particular period they were being composed. And mind you, even 100 or 200 years also matters. And if you really need to understand it, in that case I'll just ask you today, it's 2024, na? If you'll go back to 1924, in that case you'll find that the women were not enjoying proper status in the society. So in last 100 years only you have come, or you can see that the woman has transformed their status altogether. So you can't say sir 100 year mein kya fark padta, 100 year mein bahut fark padta hai. So it is you can't ignore ki let's say Vedas were written after 200 years, or they were being written 200 years earlier. So there was no difference between these two, that you can't say, correct? So time matters a lot, right? That's first thing. And then the second thing, right, that I'll discuss, that what sort of timeline that you follow, that's also very important. There are two different kind of timelines that we normally follow. Okay? One which is called as the cyclic time notion for the time, and one which is known as the linear time notion. Linear. Now you just tell me in which one history is interested, the cyclic one or the linear one? Linear one. Cyclic one is the Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, Kali Yug, and finally the Kalki avatar comes in, and then he destroys the world because the Paap ka Ghada is full in this particular world, and that's how the new world is being created. And then again you see the re-beginning of Satyug. And we are in Kali Yug right now. So whether you are aware of this fact or not, but I know that Kalki avatar has come, and then very soon this world would be destructed. So that's why clear UPSC as soon as possible for you, because after few years we do not know whether the world is going to survive or not. पाप का घड़ा ऐसे ही भरा हुआ है, ठीक है? अभी कल्कि अवतार भी आ चुके, किस मोमेंट पे दुनिया खत्म हो जाए और फिर उसके बाद जो सतयुग आ जाए, तो फिर हम वो धोती वोती पहन के आदर्श की बात करेंगे और वो सब चलेगा. UPSC नहीं होगा, वो गारंटी मैं दे सकता हूँ उस नए सतयुग में. Do you literally believe that history is going to believe in these kind of mythological principles and all? No. So cyclic notion is not important for history. But then if I'll ask you, like, to inquire into the Vedas, in that case, you just tell me honestly, like, whether Vedas are believing in the concept of cyclic notion of time or the cyclic notion of time. Like, they do not believe in the linear notion of time. But the historians are always interested in centuries, right? Then in decades, and like, in case of recent histories, they have been believing in the concept of what years also. So that is another major problem with the time. Okay, so this is one point. Like, this is an in general point that you can apply anywhere. Like, whenever you have been evaluating any particular source. Now this is this is a perpetual point that you can use. Either you have been evaluating archaeological sources or literary sources. Like, either you can see it as a positive part or a negative part. Yes. हाँ, that's also a point, right? ठीक है, अब उसको भी डिस्कस कर लेते हैं. आपने याद दिला दिया तो कर ही लेते हैं. एक और चीज़ है यार, कई बार क्या होता है कि somebody has tried to say or somebody countered this argument कि Vedas are not interested in the linear motion of time by saying this कि yes, Vedas are also very particular about that. Why? Because in fact, they are saying कि we are more particular about time. I think you must be knowing about मुहूर्त. करेक्ट. व्हाट इज मुहूर्त? मुहूर्त इज कि शाम को मॉर्निंग में 4:56 में शादी हो गई तो ठीक है, नहीं तो भाई पूरा लाइफ झगड़ा चलेगा दोनों के बीच में, ऐसा बोला तो शादी उसी टाइम पे होना चाहिए. दैट्स कॉल्ड एज मुहूर्त. नाउ डू यू लिटरली बिलीव दैट द हिस्टोरियंस वुड बी इंटरेस्टेड इन 4:56 में चंद्रगुप्त मौर्य का जन्म हुआ इसीलिए वो इसमें पैदा हुआ और वो तो राजा बनना ही था उसको? आई थिंक दीज आर इलॉजिकल. सो इन वेरी माइक्रो यूनिट्स ऑफ टाइम ऑल्सो हिस्ट्री इज नॉट इंटरेस्टेड. इन द मेजर यूनिट्स ऑफ टाइम ऑल्सो हिस्ट्री इज नॉट इंटरेस्टेड, सच एज युगास. Correct. Now, why, what the historians should do of the yugas? Okay, they are least concerned of the yugas. They need the times in the years, in the decades, and the centuries. That's I told you. These are the maximum time limits of the the time bracket what the historians have been using. So this is one aspect that you should keep in mind. Okay, fine. There is another important okay, there is another important concept in history that's called as the concept of space. Now again it matters. In fact, 2 years back or 3 years back, I think 2 years back only, in the general studies they asked one question, how come the geography puts impact over history? Correct. Now if you'll read the even NCERT, you'll find a dedicated chapter is there on the impact of geography on history, and that's how space matters a lot, right? In fact, when you read the Indian history, you find a gradual movement of the Aryans from the northwest towards the eastern side, and it matters. This particular change matters because when they are here, in the northwestern part of India, that's called as the Sub-Sindhava region, since the rainfall has gone down, that's why probably IVC declined. In that case, they also are not enabled to produce good amount of surplus. But the moment they are coming to the upper and the lower middle Gangetic plains, undoubtedly they became enabled to they were enabled to produce a surplus, and that could have led further few changes. Correct now? When you see the history of South India, we always try to connect it with certain rivers. If it is Vijayanagar, then we connect it with the Tungabhadra river. If it is the Chola, in that case we connect it with the Krishna and the Kaveri river. Why the rivers do play so important role? Because if the rivers won't be there, it must not have provided that opportunity that they could have produced the surplus, which could have become the base for the establishment of a kingdom or an empire. Correct? So that's how space does matter, right? It's very important. So you can't discuss in general ki okay, they came and they started doing something, right? Their changes, their transformation is very much depending on the space, and that's why the discussion over the space is also very important. Unfortunately, the Vedas are even not fulfilling this criteria also, because they were least concerned about the space. I hope, right, the way we say ki early Vedic period, they had been living in which part? They were living in the northwestern part. Now, on what ground we say so? Because they had been mostly discussing about the rivers flowing through Pakistan and then Rajasthan, that's the Saraswati river, but they never talk about the rivers which are flowing through the Gangetic plains, such as the Ganga, Yamuna and so on. It proves, but on the later Vedic period, they have started talking about Ganga and Yamuna. That proves ki yes, this was their location, but then they do not talk precisely about their location. That is also one limitation. Correct? So when it comes to the limitation of the sources, now you should always keep in mind when I'm saying chronology. So it is somehow a sort of bigger dimension, and in fact you should write about this. But then, as I told you, that it is applicable to all of the sources, right? Any source that you have been doing, ultimately it can be applied. Okay, fine. Then, okay, there is another problem, that the Brahminical perspective. Undoubtedly, they were composed by the Brahmins. Correct. So since they were composed by the Brahmins, and this that's why the Brahminical perspective is there. And in fact, this Brahminical perspective was as such because of what they had been trying to justify everything, such as Varna is coming. So now they are not talking about the negative parts of the Varna, or else I can give you a very practical example that when they are coming up with the Varna, so they always try to present a very ideal society which was following the Varna system. But then what sort of resistance was there of this? They were they have failed in expressing this. And I think being the Brahmins, since they had been writing it, so it's quite obvious that they won't discuss about the negative character of the society or not following of this. बहुत इसका एक relevant example मैं आपको देता हूँ. ये example आपको थोड़ा समझने में help करेगा, ठीक है? आप एक बात देखिए, what is an ideal marriage? What is an ideal marriage? मतलब आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में नहीं पूछ रहा हूँ यार, ठीक है? आप लोग डर गए कि जो है सर बोले कि जो है अपने ही कास्ट में कोई लड़की जो माँ बाप पसंद करे उसी से शादी करनी है. नहीं, मैं वो आपका पर्सनल चॉइस है, ठीक है? सो यू आर कंप्लीटली फ्री टू मैरी विद एनीबॉडी. आई एम जस्ट आस्किंग फॉर द एंशिएंट पीरियड. व्हाट इज एन आइडियल मैरिज विद इन द वर्ना? करेक्ट, दैट इज कंसिडर्ड टू वेट. But then if it was so ideal, and in fact in Brahminical text we'll find that these kind of concepts were there कि अगर आप दूसरे कास्ट में जाके करते हैं, वर्ना में जाके करते हैं, तो that was type cast with some other names. But then at the same time I must tell you that the concept of two marriages, and what are they? Anulom and the Pratilom. Now if they have themselves given the exceptional cases, it means that must be in practice. That's why they have been talking about it. So I think they are somehow giving the contradictory information, though they present society is following that particular perception or that particular theory, but then practically probably the situation was very different. And since the ancient times the love marriages are going on, people are are marrying outside of the Varna system, and society is struggling with that question. No, I'm not saying again that this is wrong. Again, as per the society it is wrong, भरे हुए. Throughout the history you will find the examples of this. Throughout the example. This situation became more problematic in the modern times when the caste identities and the Varna identities became more concrete. In the ancient and medieval times they were not very concrete. Let's say I was just living in the North India, and I was falling in the Sudra category, and then I migrated to South India, and there I started claiming but just by practicing Sanskritization I started claiming कि I am a Brahmin fellow. मैंने 4 श्लोक रट लिए, ठीक है, और वहाँ पे जाके मैंने अपने आप को ब्राह्मण डिक्लेयर कर दिया. Was there any mechanism to figure it out कि no, this person was not falling in the category of Brahmin? Of course not, right? कोई criteria नहीं हो सकती. But right now why it is easy? Because there is a list of the people, and in fact since in college we face this particular challenge every year. There were so many certificates are coming where the problems are there, and in fact in that case we just consult the university list or the central list, and if they are meeting the criteria we accept the form. They are not meeting the criteria, even though if they are falling we reject the form. So that's how we can say in the modern times somehow it becomes more concrete. Correct? So I hope you got my point. This is the Brahminical perspective and there are multiple examples I did quote, so you understand these problems are there. Okay, fine. Okay, so negative aspects. There are certain more negative aspects. One which is there here, that is life negation. That's again a very important thing. Again you should keep in mind as a general information that can be applied anywhere. Now whether the history is more interested in the material sort of thing or the spiritual sort of thing. Do you read in history that okay, this person is coming, he is highly spiritual and that's how he is getting spiritual, this is what called as Dhamma, this is called as Brahma, this is called as salvation, this is the definition of Atma. Are these the main concept or the main content of the history? No. In history we read political history, in history we read the economic history, agricultural history, right, trade and commerce, then the social history, and then religion is just one part. Maybe spiritualism we study, right, philosophy we study, but then this is just one part of history. History is not merely interested in this part, correct? But then when you read about the Vedas, you will find that perception that there is a concept of life negation. What is this life negation? What is the main target in your life? आपके जीवन में उद्देश्य क्या है? फिर क्या करोगे यार? यूपीएससी क्लियर करके यूपीएससी कर ले, चलो उसके बाद काम मिलेगा वो कर लोगे, फिर उसके बाद दैट्स इट. उसके बाद मोक्ष. At the end you reach to that concept कि in the life we have to get the moksha, and now that moksha can be defined in multiple ways. मैं उसमें नहीं जा रहा हूँ भी, ठीक है. I hope you got the point. In Brahminical text you will find that the ultimate goal of the life that has been decided as what? Moksha. So they are saying ki what is there in this material life? The way you people are very clear, categorically clear that we have to clear UPSC. Then you have to get married with a good girl or a good boy, correct? और उसके बाद लाइफ में बच्चे पैदा करने हैं, खूब पैसा कमाना है, प्रोग्रेस करना है. That is your goal. So this is the materialistic goal. In history, people are more interested, historians are more interested in materialistic goal. They are not interested ki whether this person is interested in attaining moksha or not. What is the concern of that in history? And that's how we can say ki they ultimately, the Vedas have been following that concept of life negation, whether history is more interested in the materialist, material progresses and all. So life is the most important thing rather than the spiritualism is the most important thing, right? There are a couple of additional points that you should note here. They are important. So such as there are certain points I explained, but apart from this also, there is a serious problem with the Vedas, that they are in composed format. Correct? So their compilation takes place pretty late. Normally we associate the Gupta period with this compilation. I think these are the things that you all must be aware of. है ना? आप सबको पता है. Now this is something. Do you literally believe that whatsoever is being composed, the same continued at the time of compilation? No. So there is a huge difference of the time between composition and the compilation, right? And that brings another problem. That brings the problem of extrapolation. That's a very important term, right? ये keywords है. जितने words मैं इस्तेमाल करता हूँ उस पर बहुत ध्यान दीजिएगा. These are the keywords. It is the extrapolation. So what was written in the original text could not convey to the later thing, and that's why we can say कि extrapolation becomes a major problem. I have already discussed about one problem with the time. Now you just imagine कि our basic perception is this, that Rig Veda was composed somewhere between 1500 to 1000. But then it was by the time of the by the time of compilation, let's say it is extrapolated a lot. In that case, the historians must be struggling with this question, that whether this feature was there in the later Vedic period or in the Gupta period, historical age, or in the Vedic period. So this is how extrapolation also remains a sort of a big problem with the Brahminical text. So this is also a problem which is there. There is one more problem that was not categorically written here, but then it was there. But then you use this word. It is again a sort of key word for you, that's authorship. I think whenever you have been explaining any text, or whenever you have been trying to use any particular text for history writing, and you do not know the name of the author, in that case it becomes very tough for you to place it somewhere in the history. Let's say when you have been reading the book of history, you know that it is R.S. Sharma. He has written the book with a Marxist perspective, and that's how you are pretty clear कि अच्छा ये आदमी तो हर जगह चीजें वैसे ही देखेगा. So it is his own perspective. It is not the completely a sort of truth or completely the right perspective. Correct? So when you know about the authorship, your potential or your ability increases in order to explain that particular text. In the case of Brahminical literature, that's in general applicable to all the Brahminical literature. We do not know the name of authors, and that's how it remains a major problem with the history, because we can't locate it somewhere कि exactly हमें किस perspective से पढ़ना है. So that I have already discussed about this Brahminical perspective. So in that case, we just know that yes, all the texts were written by the Brahmin, and that's how they are always presenting this Brahminical perspective. That's the general perception. But then it cannot be applied everywhere. Why? Because the Upanishads are also Brahminical texts, but the Upanishads are giving a very counter perspective of the society, and that's how you can't go for a sort of universal or a general treatment to them. You need to know the authors. That's also one problem. So when it comes to Vedas, I think clarity is there that what are the other points that you can include. So these are the negative aspects of the year. Now what are the various scholars, those who have been giving their view? So ज़्यादातर करके जो ancients वो है टेक्स्ट है उसमें रोमिला थापर का और ए एल बॉसम का व्यू आपको मिलेगा. ठीक है, आपको कुछ नहीं समझ में आ रहा है, कम से कम ब्राह्मणिकल टेक्स्ट के लिए इंक्लूड देयर नेम्स, दैट सफिशिएंट. ए एल बॉसम को रेफर करने में रिस्क भी नहीं है. वाई? बिकॉज ही इज ए वेरी न्यूट्रल काइंड ऑफ हिस्टोरियन. ही इज राइटिंग मोस्टली द कल्चरल हिस्ट्री, एंड सिंस ही इज राइटिंग द कल्चरल हिस्ट्री, एंड दैट्स व्हाई देयर इज नो प्रॉब्लम एट ऑल. आजकल भी कुछ ऐसे हिस्टोरियंस हैं जिसको आप बहुत उस पर न्यूट्रल अनबायस करके कोड कर सकते हैं। जैसे मेडिवल के टाइम पे मैं कुछ चीज़ें कहता हूँ कि जैसे एबा कॉक को आप कर दीजिए, ठीक है, या फिर जैसे पारुल पांड्याधर है एंशिएंट के टाइम पे उसको कर दीजिए। ये कुछ न्यूट्रल हिस्टोरियंस होते हैं जिनको आप कोड कर सकते हैं। तो एक टेक्स्ट के मामले में रोमिला थापर सी emphasizes the symbolic nature of the Vedas and their importance in understanding the early Indian society. A.L. Bossom highlights the Vedas cultural insight while acknowledging the limitations, right? So he talks about limitation. So you just need to remember कि रोमिला थापर talks about the symbolic nature of Vedas, मतलब they are not writing the history, but then the history can be extracted, जिसको आप कहते हैं embedded history, जिसको आप कहते हैं, so that is this is the like, in fact you can note down that word also, ठीक है, the embedded history is there. Now he criticizes it, like, you know, and in fact he talks about the limitation. Michael Witzel, again, like, you know, with respect to the sources, this person is very important. Now he discusses the linguistic significance of the Vedas in the understanding of early Indo-Aryan languages. So he emphasizes on just one part, that if you really need to understand the linguistic development or the script, the development of the script, in that case they are quite helpful. So these are three different scholars that you can quote. इतने भी करेंगे काम चल जाएगा, ठीक है, बहुत ज़्यादा लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है. So these are certain scholars. Fine, okay, let's move forward. Now moving to the next, ये वेदास भी आज तक उन लोगों ने कभी पूछा नहीं as a source of history, but then it does have the great potential to be asked in form of question, correct? Now epics as a source of history, this question was also not directly ever been asked, like, you know, to you in UPSC, but then I am telling you, mark my words, आने वाले 3, 4, 5 सालों में इसमें से 100% क्वेश्चन आएगा, मैं लिख के दे सकता हूँ, आएगा, सीधा सीधा पूछेगा कि एपिक्स एज सोर्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री, राइट, या वेदास एज सोर्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री, राइट. सो चांसेस आर देयर, ओके फाइन. हाँ, तो बट एपिक्स हैज बीन आस्क्ड इनडायरेक्टली व्हेन, लाइक, यू नो, दे हैव आस्क्ड द क्वेश्चन ऑन, और दे हैव आस्क्ड मल्टीपल टाइम्स क्वेश्चन ऑन द इतिहासा पुराना ट्रेडिशन. सो पुराना इज वेरी क्लियर टू, इतिहासा इज दिस ओनली बिकॉज देयर वर सो मेनी राइट विंग स्कॉलर्स, दे कंसिडर इतिहासा एज द एपिक्स एज द इतिहासा. वो बोलते ये हुआ था, ठीक है, ये हुआ था और इसको जो है लोगों ने लिखा है, दैट्स इट. सो दे वर वेरी क्लियर ऑन दिस, करेक्ट. ओके, कमिंग बैक, एपिक्स, you know about Ramayana and Mahabharata, ठीक है. Whenever you have been writing about the introduction, right, always mention the period, and since you know the name of the authors here, right, so you can mention कि Ved Vyas and Valmiki, they are writing this text, this is the period in which, like, you know, it got compiled, it got composed in multiple stages, right, that you all must have studied in the text. वो उतना मैं जाऊँगा नहीं डिटेल में, ठीक है. Okay, now epics as a source of history. Now we are just going to, like, you know, follow the same structure what we have followed over there, correct. So first thing is the cultural and the religious insight. Ultimately we believe that this is mythology, and that's why it is giving us very good insight on the, like, you know, mythological narrative, ठीक है. Whereas, like, you know, this sort of things like Ramayana is talking about that incarnation of Vishnu and all these kind of things, ठीक है. आज ही एक कॉन्फ्रेंस से आ रहा हूँ, वहाँ पे कहते हैं वो एक इसके JNU के एक साइंटिस्ट आए थे, और वो बेसिकली जितने भी इंडिया में रिसर्च होते हैं उसकी फंडिंग के लिए जो है, जो कमेटी है उसके हेड हैं वो, तो बोल रहे थे कि जो है 3 बार अवतार हुआ है उसका, विष्णु का मेजरली जो है वो, एक रामायण के राम के फॉर्म में हुआ, और दूसरा महाभारत में कृष्ण के फॉर्म में हुआ, और तीसरा टीचर के फॉर्म में हुआ है, ठीक है. कल के, हाँ, ये उनका स्टेटमेंट है, मैं जैसे वो कर रहा हूँ, दैट वाज अ लॉन्ग डे, लाइक, यू नो, होल डे कॉन्फ्रेंस टुडे. सो या, सो दिस इज व्हाट ही हैड बीन सेइंग, इज अ बिग साइंटिस्ट, ठीक है, जो ये कह रहे थे. ओके फाइन. So mythological narrative, right? So that you understand. Then ethical and the moral lessons. So you all understand कि ultimately in the Mahabharata you will find that mostly the ethical and all these kind of things are there. But then that also constitutes history, right? ऐसा नहीं है कि ethical part or the morality or the, let's say, no, the ethics and all these kind of things were not very important for history. They are also part of history. So that we do get from it. Okay. The most important thing is about the social structure. There are several, you know, sort of references, or the stories are as such. On the basis of that we extract history from it. That's the significance of it, correct. Okay, role of women. So they are like not directly writing about the role of women, but then through the stories we extract the status of women during this period. Like, you know, we can write about so many things such as caste system. So caste is not the right term, like, you know, we should write about the Varna, in fact, ठीक है. There is great confusion, but ठीक है, वो reason है जिसकी वजह से लिखा हुआ. You can also write caste, or you can write give a slash and you can write about Varna. So we get information of these kind of things through it. Such as one example, right, is there also कि in Ramayana you can find that Sita is always suppressed. Right. On the other hand, in Mahabharata, you find that the Draupadi is very empowered, and in fact, that, like, you know, changes the whole interpretation of Ramayana and Mahabharata also. So we do extract certain information on role of women also. Correct. Okay, moving next, we undoubtedly get the idea of the political, political organization. In fact, there are so many scholars they have said कि Ramayana and Mahabharata, if they are used as a symbolic text, but then in that case, you'll be getting a very good information. Such as I'm just telling you one thing. In Ramayana, you find the story is all moving around that woman. The woman was abducted. मतलब I'm just talking about Sita Mata. गलत तरीके से मत लेना, आज का डर भी रखता है, ठीक है. तो Sita Mata was abducted and then Ram is going to rescue her, ठीक है. But in Mahabharata, what was the core reason for the war? Land. So, understand the difference between the two. In Mahabharata, in Ramayana, land was not the important thing, right? In Mahabharata, land is becoming important thing. It means that the land had become significant in the Dwapar Yuga. Whether in Treta Yuga, it was not there. Treta Yuga, matlab, that must be any period, and we mostly believe that Ramayana was prior to Mahabharata, and that's how we extract all these periods. Things. So we also come to know about the ruler of rights of ruler or the role of kingship and the various bureaucracy, and then sometimes we get information from the diplomacy and warfare, such as Bhagavad Gita is undoubtedly a text which is giving you a very good insight of the diplomacy and then political principles and all these kind of things. So the things are not directly written, but then they can be definitely extracted, right? Okay, then it comes to economic aspects. You got a very good insight of the economic aspects also. And let me give you one example to prove, such as when it comes to Mahabharata. There is one episode that finally the Pandavas were refused to be given the the original land, or the actually where the empire was there. And then they were given in another land, and that was Khandaprast. Correct, na? So when they are getting into the Khandaprast, so it was all barren land, and then Krishna suggests him to clear this land and make it cultivable. Correct. So then they are burning this, and then finally they are converting it into cultivable land. So now this is a story, but then this story can be extracted this story can be interpreted in this way, how they had been converting the land into barren land into agricultural land, and in fact that also shows about the expansion of the agriculture, and in that regard we can say this is so many things. It does talk about some trade and commerce, the wealth and the prosperity, the rich people, the poor people, and that's how we do get a very good insight of the agriculture, then trade, right, expansion of agriculture, the conversion of lands into agriculture, irrigation, and all these things information we do get. So that's how we can say most of the four aspects which are important, we do get information from that. When it comes to the limitations, I think the same limitations are there what we have discussed for the Vedas. Ultimately, for always the Brahminical text, you can go for the similar definitions, similar limitations. Most of them are having the similar limitations. जितने points हमने उधर बोले, आप उतने points यहाँ पे repeat कर सकते हैं. In fact, अगर आपको थोड़ी बहुत भी doubt है authorship को लेके, तो मैं आपको वो भी clear कर दूँ कि authorship भी वहाँ पे clear नहीं है. Whereas Ramayana and Mahabharata were not compiled in one go. Rather, you know that they were composed and compiled in multiple stages, and that's how you can't give credit to one author that they have authored it, and that's the problems. Yeah.
Genuine answer या ideal answer writing के समय में महाभारत को जय संहिता लिखेंगे या महाभारत लिखेंगे?
आप कुछ भी लिखे, दोनों नाम है उसके. आइडियली क्या लिखना चाहिए? हाँ, महाभारत लिखना चाहिए. क्यों महाभारत लिखना चाहिए? When the text appeared to us, it appeared in form of Mahabharata. Right. So in the initial period, it was known as Jaya Samhita. So I think it's better to write Mahabharata. Correct? Okay, fine. And the best way is, whenever you have been dealing with it, write epics. सबसे बेहतर है. हाँ, आपको एग्जाम्पल लिखना है तो रामायण महाभारत एक जगह पे लिख दीजिए, देन यू फर्दर राइट लाइक राइट. ओके, एज आई टोल्ड यू दैट मोरल एज द हिस्टोरियंस आर गोइंग टू बी सेम. So A.L. Bossum, he talks about the cultural richness of the epics, and in fact the various cultural values, the systems, the practices that we come across can come across through this particular text. Romila Thapar, she talks about the symbolic and the allegorical elements of this particular text. And there's a new scholar, the scholar is J.L. Brockington, right? So he discusses the historical and the literary evolution of the epics, stressing their significance in understanding the ancient Indian society, right? So एक दो scholars कुछ नए आएंगे, थोड़ा सा इसको जब बार बार आप रिवाइज करेंगे तो that they'll come into your mind. Okay, coming to the next one, the Puranas, the most favorite topic of the UPSC people. ठीक है, वो पता नहीं उनकी पता नहीं कहते हैं ना कि देहाती भाषा में कहते हैं कि नाल गड़ी हुई है वहाँ पे. ठीक है, तो वो पुरानास के साथ उनका वैसा वाला ऑब्सेशन है. ओके, so before I come to the Puranas, let me get you some brief idea about the Puranas. What Puranas are? Look, Puranas were like somehow being written from the 3rd century BC, and then the last Purana was written somewhere in the early medieval times. Okay? In fact, this is also something I have read somewhere, that the last Purana was called as Akbar Purana, that was written somewhere in 16th century. But then if we did not include that in that list of Puranas, in that case we can talk about somewhere in the 11th century the last Purana was written. So in a longer period several Puranas were being written. There are 18 major Puranas and there are 18 जिसको आप महापुराण कहते हैं, and there are 18 उप Puranas, right? So total 36 है ये नंबर में. ये सब कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन है, आप इंट्रोडक्शन में इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं, इससे ज़्यादा इसकी ज़रूरत होती नहीं है. फाइन. Officially it is the credit has been given to Ved Vyas. Yes, he has written the Puranas, correct? Apart from this, there was some other information I believe that you all must be aware of. Then briefly let me review it. So basically when it comes to Puranas, there is another information which is important for the Puranas, that Puranas were written in a longer period of time, and then there was a concept, there was an objective behind the writing of Puranas. And what is that objective? Puranas are even called as the 5th Veda, right? The Puranas are even referred as 5th Veda. Why it is referred as 5th Veda? Because it was believed that Vedas could not be tempered further. Vedas cannot be manipulated further. So how to incorporate the new changes which were being introduced in the religion? That's called as Brahmanism. Got my point? मैं फिर से एक बार repeat कर देता हूँ. Puranas are primarily written for this reason, that it was supposed to include the information that was it was supposed to include the information about the further developments taking place in Brahmanism. That was the main purpose. So since और ऐसा क्यों था, क्योंकि जो है उसको हम वेदास को फर्दर हम वो नहीं टेम्पर नहीं कर सकते थे, उसको हम रीराइट नहीं कर सकते थे, तो इन्होंने पुरानास लिखा. And I hope that can get you a sort of deeper concept of the Puranas. When I am saying ki so as far as Puranas are concerned, so as I told you that this is also known as 5th Veda, correct? And it was to incorporate the further development in Brahmanism. Now the question is that what are the further developments in Brahmanism? What are the further developments in Brahmanism?
New sects.
You can't say like that. You can say what are the further developments? Right? So basically, Indian history is a continuous history of integration. Aryans and indigenous people. When they are integrating the indigenous people within their culture, simultaneously they had been adopting their ritualistic or their religious belief also. Correct? How to incorporate them into Brahmanism. That's why the Puranas were being written. And the Vedic gods, the indigenous gods, which were so popular among them, now they were basically the indigenous gods which were so popular among them. Now these indigenous gods were mostly presented in form of what? There is a very important word that had been used in Indian history, Indian mythology basically, that is incarnation. Correct? Huh? You have heard that Narsingh is the avatar of Vishnu. Baman is the avatar of Vishnu. Right? So I hope you can understand it historically. So when the Aryan culture is trying to expand itself, it is integrating the indigenous people. While integrating them, they are also integrating their religious beliefs. Now their religious belief had to be also integrated into the Brahminical religion or the Brahminical religious concept, and that's how they got the incarnation concept. And whenever any local deity or the cult which was very popular, now they were declared as the incarnation of Vishnu, and that's how these concepts come in. Got it? So ये सारा कहाँ लिखा हुआ है? पुराना में. And that's where the Puranas are mainly the story of incarnations. Got it? That is the real concept of the Purana. Okay, fine. Moving further, I can say that when it comes to the Puranas, that the Puranas are divided into 5 parts. And what are they? कौन से 5 हिस्से में डिवाइडेड है पुराना? देख के बताओगे यार, हद हो गई यार. सर्ग, सॉरी, प्रतिसर्ग, मनवांतरस, देन चरितास एंड वंशावलीज. देखिए, इस क्लास का आपको बेहतर तरीके से फ़ायदा लेना है ना, तो आप ये वाला टॉपिक हमेशा रिवाइज करके आइए. आपने जहाँ से भी पढ़ा है, यू कम टू द क्लास आफ्टर रिवाइजिंग. हम एक दिन 1 यूनिट करेंगे, 1 यूनिट तो रिवाइज करके आप आ ही सकते हैं. सबसे बेस्ट मैं क्या चाहता हूँ, यू जस्ट रिवाइज इट वंस, राइट, वॉट एवर द कंटेंट यू हैव रेड, come to the class and after getting back from the class you revise the content what you have done. आधा घंटा बाद में, 1 घंटा पहले, right? So if you have been doing at least this much practice na, then apart from this you are not supposed to do anything for the revision of the history, and by the end of the course will be done with the history optional. Everything, even the writing practice and all these things we are doing simultaneously ना, so आपको कुछ और करने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी, इसी से काम हो जाएगा हमारा. So these are the 5 part. What is the sarga? That is creation of the world. Pratisarga, recreation of the world, right? Manvantaras, that's the various yugas of Manu. Then the Charitas is the hagiography, right? And the Vamsanu Charita is basically what? The genealogies, correct? अब ये सब मैं इतना लिख नहीं रहा हूँ, आप सब पढ़ के आना चाहिए आपको ये सब, ठीक है? सो बेसिकली ये है. अब देखो, कल मैंने कहा ना कि जो कंसेप्ट है युगास का, कि एक युग खत्म होता है, दूसरा आता है, कलयुग के बाद धरती का विनाश होता है, एंड देन रिक्रिएशन होता है. एंड सिंस इट इज लाइक दीज 3 things ultimately talking about the creation and the recreation of the world, correct? And that's how you know that in the process of creation and the recreation there are 3 gods that have been playing very important role. That's called as Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh, है ना? Mahesh. Most of the Puranas are divided into these 3 parts because they are talking about the incarnation of all 3 every time. Okay, there is a new world getting created, and then Brahma is creating the god, Vishnu is preserving it, and when the Pap ka ghada is full, then Vishnu is killing the person, like who has been creating the problem, and then finally the Shiva comes, does the Tandava, and that's how the world is getting finished, and then the creation of the new world, right? So the first 3 is talking about this. While doing so, it does talk about the Indian geography. That's how it naturally getting interested into the geography. But then for us, the last 2 parts are the most important, like thing. Why? The Charitas are basically the hagiographies. आप जब धरती के विनाश और उसकी बात कर रहे हैं, रिक्रिएशन की बात कर रहे हैं, so ultimately you have been talking about the various things. हाँ, exactly. बहुत सारी चीज़ें. आप जब रिक्रिएशन की बात करते हैं, क्यों आपको लगता है कि the people were damn interested in the creation of the world long back? And then all these theories had come at that point of time ना, बहुत सारी theories तो पहले आ गई. क्यों? क्योंकि naturally they were interested in this, and that's how they had been discussing about, right? तो geography का discuss है, ठीक है. And then it comes to hagiography. Hagiography is basically the biography of the sages, correct? And then it comes to the Vamsanu Charita, and seriously speaking, this is nothing but the genealogies, correct? Genealogies is basically the genealogies of various kingdoms of the dynasties, not kingdoms, dynasties, correct? So undoubtedly for us, the maximum historical information that we get from this part, which is known as what? Genealogies. ज़्यादातर चीज़ें हमें यहाँ से मिलती है. That's a brief survey of the Puranas. इतना basic detail आपको पता होना चाहिए. Correct? Coming back to our journey. So now, how come the Puranas are helping us in writing the history? Basic concept. ये वाला question, the concept what I had been telling you ना, they have asked once in the question. They have been in a very twisted manner, but they have asked I'll show you while discussing the older questions, the previous year questions. We'll talk about this. Okay. So then it comes to significance of the Puranas. ठीक है. So we can talk about the cosmological and the mythological narratives, that what I had been discussing. How come they're getting interested in the cosmology, and that's why they had been discussing about these kind of things. Genealogy and the historical accounts. That's the most important information that we do have. Why? Because they have categorically given the genealogies from the post-modern period to, roughly speaking, the Gupta period. Okay? We find the genealogies of most of the kingdom, though they are not 100% trustworthy. but yet they are very helpful, because once you juxtapose this information with the other information, in that case you are able to find a correct information. And in fact, any kingdom that you say in this period, ultimately you'll find the genealogy. The best example what you can quote here is the Satvana example. There were 3 Puranas, that's called as Matsya Purana, Vayu Purana and the Brahmand Purana. Like, combinedly they had been giving the list of 47 rulers, and more or less these are like, available in the other sorts of sources also. So that's how genealogy is the pure historical information. In fact, like, let me tell you, such as who is considered as the founder of Gupta kingdom, Sri Gupta, but then Sri Gupta is not mentioned in any archaeological source. It is being proved from the Puranic sources only. Like, we claim that it was there. Okay, fine. Then undoubtedly it is talking about the cultural and the religious practices. I did tell you that what is the basic objective for this, and that's how it is giving the information about this. Like, I have included the informations and all here, such as Skand Puran, which is talking about this. So I have just tried to make it sure that the examples and everything is here only, correct? So that is there. So rituals, festivals, and then all these changes which are happening, that avatar concept what I had been discussing, वो सब इधर जो है वो लिखा हुआ है. तो स्कंद पुराण इसका बेहतर example है. Then the philosophical teaching is also there, right? You do find the information for the for the philosophy also. So the Bhagavad Puran. Social and political insight, undoubtedly, like, since it had been covering so many things, and that's how you do find some structures, like, information about the social structures such as caste, communities and all, because since it is talking about, it is primarily because of the integration of the Aryans with the non-Aryans, and that's how it is talking about it. And that's why in Padma Purana you find that the responsibilities of each caste, emphasizing the importance of dharma and all. So these kind of informations are there. Political system, right? So political system में of course governance, administration, role of kingship, statecraft, ये सारी information मिलती है. Agni Purana is the best example for this. The sources are very important, right? और बहुत ढूंढ के जमा करके इसको लेके आया हूँ मैं. ये नॉर्मल टेक्स्ट में तो नहीं मिलेगा, ये दैट आई कैन प्रॉमिस. एंड दैट्स व्हाई आई हैव मेड श्योर कि आपको कुछ और ना पढ़ना पड़े, इससे आपका काम हो जाए, हर कुछ यहाँ पे मिल जाए, ठीक है? ओके, बट देन देयर आर सर्टेन लिमिटेशंस. आई थिंक लिमिटेशंस तो हम पूरी कहानी पढ़ चुके हैं. We don't need to go for much like extensive time for this. So mythological and religious in nature, chronological ambiguity, like you can't fix the exact chronological period. The sectarian biases. So Puranas were written particularly from the religious viewpoint, and often emphasizing the superiority of the specific deities and the sects. That definitely they'll be doing, the way they have been proving the incarnation. Most of the religious cults or gods as the incarnation, deities as the incarnation. That's what authors by it, that's the problem with the authorship. So that's how all these problems are appearing. Now, as far as the scholars are concerned, there are Pragitter is the most Pargitter, sorry. F.E. Pargitter is the most important person that you should write in your answer. Why? Because Pargitter emphasized the historical value of the Puranas. बहुत पुराने स्कॉलर हैं, लेकिन आज भी अगर आप पुराणस के ऊपर कोई भी आर्टिकल पढ़ेंगे या फिर आप एम एस श्रीधरन की बुक पढ़ेंगे तो आपको ये स्कॉलर मेंशन मिलते हैं, ठीक है? ये सब नए स्कॉलर हैं, जैसे वेटम मानी, ठीक है, हाईलाइट्स द पुरानास रोल इन शेपिंग इंडियन कल्चर एंड द रिलीजियस प्रैक्टिसेस, noting their influence in the literature and art, correct? And then there's another important scholar, that scholar is Dr. Mahalingam, इसका नाम शायद आप लोगों ने सुना भी होगा, advocates for the systematic study of the Puranas as historical sources, arguing that they contain valuable insight into the ancient Indian society. There is one viewpoint is missing here that you can incorporate, Rumila Thapa's view. Rumila Thapa says a very important thing, if you'll read the Puranas in continuity, you'll be able to understand the gradual changes coming into the Indian society, polity, economy and so on. Rumila Thapa says कि with the help of Puranas, you can understand the gradual changes coming into the society. They again she says कि it is symbolic in nature, but then it conveys this kind of idea. Okay. That's it. नहीं, एक टेक्स्ट अभी बचा है हमारा, ठीक है? वो कौन सा था बचा? धर्मशास्त्र, ठीक है? Dharmasastra. Dharmasastra क्या है? That's a text which is including. There are a couple of texts that are combinedly called as Dharmasastra. And what are these texts? Sutras. Dharma Sutra. Dharma Sutra is further divided into 3 parts: Griha Sutra, Sulva Sutra, and Srauta Sutra. Correct? And they all are talking about the various rituals. Griha Sutra, domestic rituals. Srauta Sutra, public rituals. Right? Sulva Sutra, which is talking about the various it's an art of making the fire altars and all. Srutas. But so these sutras are there. Smritis, another important component, the law books of ancient times, that's called as smritis, such as Narad Smriti, Yagvalak Smriti, Narad Smriti, Manu Smriti, and so on, correct? Brihaspati Smriti, lambi list hai. Apart from that, you can find even the Nivandas and the Britis. So commentaries on these smritis, basically they are called as Nivandas and all, right? So these commentaries are also very important, such as like I think you might have heard the name of Jimut Vahan. सुना है या फिर आपने क्षेमेंद्र का नाम सुना है दाए भाग एंड मिताक्षरा these are basically commentaries on the legal text of India so these are commentaries so these commentaries are also part of it why because ultimately they were the further extension of these smritis so dharma sutras आप समझ गए कि क्यों in order to organize the society a text was needed and that's how the dharma sutra is coming into existence. So I think there cannot be any better text in order to understand the society of that particular period, right? Even the polity also, because if it is a legal text, in that case it is even talking about the legal sort of things also. So do you literally believe that any text can be better? Of course, it is not a single text. Then Dharma Shastra, as far as finding information of on the ancient period is concerned, no, it is no, it cannot be. There cannot be any text. Undoubtedly, it's highly biased, right? But yet it is very helpful, and it is so unfortunate that UPSC hasn't asked this question. But again, I'm telling you here that wait for some years, UPSC will ask this question, right? That's why I have incorporated. Okay. Now Dharma Shastra as a source of history, correct? So it won't be giving you very good information on political and the economic dimension, but the social and the religious dimension are covered in a best way in this particular text, right? Such as the social structure in the Varna system. Now, no text can be better than this in order to understand, because the access of the various Varnas to the religious domain, the social domain, and all these domains that you can understand through this, right? So, social structure in the Varna system. Then the gender relation in the family law. Now, when you mostly talk about the subjugation of women in the ancient times, it is primarily based on these texts. Why? Because it is giving us various kind of laws, such as, right, they are giving us the laws as in what are the rights of the woman in inheriting the property, whether they could literally inherit the property or not. Most of the Smriti writers are denying any such sort of right. Stridhana is being discussed over here, like the laws for the separation. If the woman is not able to give birth to children, in that case, the husband does have the right to leave the woman, right, or to to marry another woman. But then there is very fewer provisions are there when the wife could leave the husband. Husband छोड़ दे बहुत सारे provisions है. Wife अगर वो है बच्चलन है, wife अगर जो है खराब है, सुंदर नहीं देखने में, पति की सेवा नहीं करके देती है, ये सारे conditions है. मैं मजाक में नहीं कर रहा हूँ, आप ऐसा मत समझना कि मैं बहुत patriarchal character का हूँ, ठीक है? ये सब लिखे हुए हैं उसमें. यार जब आप उसमें जाएंगे ना 6th सेंचुरी में जाएंगे तो वुमेन की डेफिनेशन ऐसी है कि जब हस्बैंड शाम को काम करके आए तो हस्बैंड को एकदम तैयार होकर मिलना चाहिए. ये सब लिखा हुआ है टेक्स्ट में, जहाँ पे वो कालिदास कहते हैं कि कलयुग क्यों है, तो वो एग्जाम्पल देते हैं कि ये सारी चीज़ें खत्म हो रही हैं इंडिया से, तो बोलते कलयुग आ रहा है. तो वाइफ के गर्ल्स को लेके या फिर वुमेन को लेके ऐसी जो है वो है उनकी एक्सपेक्टेशंस ऐसी है, करेक्ट. So gender relation, I think the best book to understand the gender relationship or patriarchy. Then it comes to political governance and Raj Dharma. So since they are dealing with the laws and all, and that's how indirectly references are there, where they have been talking about the duties of the king, the duties of the ministers, the various responsibilities, and in fact that broader perception which is there as the duty of the king, that is also coming from this text. And what is the the most ideal expectation from the ruler? What is his prime duty? Protect kingdom, nahi. To maintain the social order. That is correct. It is the dharma only. But then it is categorically written that the king is first expected to maintain the social order. What is the social order? People should not violate the laws. Laws मतलब social laws. क्राइम करे चलेगा, लेकिन एक ब्राह्मण आदमी जो है एक सोसाइटी का वो हायरार्की जो है वो नहीं तोड़े. दैट इज कॉल्ड एज सोशल ऑर्डर. दैट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, करेक्ट. सो ये सब इन्फॉर्मेशन इधर मिलता है, ठीक है. ओके फाइन. Apart from that, legal procedure and the justice, I have already discussed a lot about this. Everything, inheritance, civil laws, the legal procedure, everything has been discussed categorically here. Then partially economic activities and the land holding. How come economic activities? Because they are very conscious about the land holding. And later somewhere in the Gupta period, we'll do this debate when we'll discuss about that how come the land holding was a crucial subject and how it was being dealt in the ancient time. It means that consciousness was there for the land holding. So, and the land holding everything. So agriculture, expansion of agriculture, taxation, and then partial references of trade and commerce. Manusmriti is the most important text. Duties of the different social classes, that is more fit in the society part. But here also it is very fit. Why? Because when you have been practicing agriculture to the next level, in that case, you have to somehow secure that good number of laborers are available for working in the farm, and that's how the social division with respect to the labor is very important, and that is being discussed here, right? Then the religious and the ethical duties, ये तो ठीक है यार, ये तो होगा ही. So these are some important information that we have been getting from it, right? Now historians view on Dharma Shastra, P.V. Kane, that is again a very important historian and very old historian, but remember him for two things. Like Kane is known for his work on Dharma Shastras, and the second is on Artha Shastra, ठीक है? तो ये याद रखिएगा कि इसके बारे में बात करते हैं. In history of Dharma Shastra, argued that Dharma Shastra is an invaluable source of understanding the legal and the social organization in ancient India. According to him, Dharma Shastra is not just a religious text but a guide to understanding the Indian civilization, correct? The Patrick Olivelle, so he viewed Dharma Shastra as the reflection of the practical realities of the ancient Indian society, correct? He highlighted the adaptability as a legal and the moral code over the centuries. And then George Buhler, he emphasized that the Dharma Shastra was a sophisticated legal system designated to maintain the social harmony. He acknowledged its psychological and sociological dimensions, indicating a deep connection with the daily life. ठीक है? So these are the various historians talking about it. ये कुछ important स्मृतिस के बारे में लिखा है. So that's the significance of the स्मृतिस, Dharma Shastras. याद करिएगा, ये टेक्स्ट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. इन जनरल इन्फॉर्मेशन में भी आपको बहुत इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं. इट्स नॉट यू आर नॉट राइटिंग एनी आंसर प्रिसाइजली ऑन दिस धर्म शास्त्र, बट देन while writing answer on the gender and other sort of things, I think this is the best examples there. Okay, fine. So yes, we are done with that Brahminical part. We have been done. Okay. Now let's switch to another sort of source that's called as the Buddhist text, right? So as I have already told you that they are also very important, the Buddhist texts. And in fact, Buddhist texts, I believe that they are very important. Again, I won't say that questions have been categorically asked on the Buddhist text, but then they are important, right? At any point of time, you might see a question from this part. Anyways, now Buddhist text as a source of history. So first of all, we have to prove that they are giving us information about the. अच्छा, पहले Buddhist text आपको मैं पहले ही बता दूँ. When it comes to Buddhist text, थोड़ा एक brief idea Buddhist text का. Now what is that? It is divided into, just a second, canonical and non-canonical.
One of my friend who has anthropology optional said that कि उनके optional में आर्यन invasion valid ही नहीं है, वो उसको valid ही नहीं मानते. तो हमारे इसके optional में क्या status है आर्यन invasion? इसको valid लिखना है answer writing में, invalid लिखना है, क्या लिखना है?
For answering that question, I'll take extra money. Are you ready to pay? एक तो सबसे पहले, I am not criticizing anybody, right? But then do you literally believe, did I say ever कि whatever I am saying that's correct? नहीं ना. In history, nobody can claim कि this is the correct statement. I think we'll be doing this Aryan debate na, and we'll be reading both the theories.
Yes.
One is Aryan invasion and one Aryans are the indigenous people. The Aryan-Harappan relationship also we are going to study. There also we are going to study that how come one view is this, that Aryans invaded the Harappans and then Harappans were defeated and that's how the Aryans superseded them, correct? But on the other hand, there is another interpretation we are going to read कि they were contemporary and they were linked to each other. There was a cordial relationship between these two. So मैं तो कभी बोलूँगा ही नहीं, मैं क्यों बोलूँगा भाई मैं कि वो गलत बोल रहे हैं या सही बोल रहे हैं, मैं तो दोनों चीज़ पढ़ा देता हूँ.
अगर क्वेश्चन में आता है तो हमें
आपको क्या लगता है? एक चीज़ तो हमेशा याद रखना है कि the people those who have been going to frame the question and evaluate your answers, they are literally talented people, they are knowledgeable people, they are literally scholars. So I think you can't doubt on them. और आपको क्या लगता है यूपीएससी एक आदमी ने बना दिया एक क्वेश्चन और यूपीएससी बोलते हैं हाँ डाल दो इसको, ऐसा नहीं होता है. उनका एक प्रॉपर फुल प्रूफ सिस्टम होता है. इन लॉजिक यूपीएससी के साथ एक बड़ी चीज़ क्या पता है, इट इज़ वन ऑफ द मोस्ट लॉजिकल एंड द रैशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन इन दिस कंट्री. मेरे बहुत ट्रस्ट है यूपीएससी पे। ये रिसेंट के कुछ एपिसोड्स को आप छोड़ देना, आई ट्रस्ट लाइक ए लॉट इन यूपीएससी, और मुझे कभी भी उसके इनजस्टिस पे कभी होता होगा, देखो मैनुअल चीज़ें तो हो, मैनुअल मेरे मिस्टेक्स तो हो सकती है, बट क्वेश्चन बनाने में मिस्टेक्स आपने देखा पीसीएस में बहुत गलतियाँ होती हैं, यूपीएससी में नहीं होती ना गलतियाँ, और अगर होती है तो तुरंत रेक्टिफाई करते हैं कि भाई ये गलती भी इसको मैंने हटा दिया यहाँ से, प्रॉपर चीज़ों के साथ करते हैं, तो यूपीएससी पर ट्रस्ट कर सकते हैं, है ना। तो मत छोड़िए उन पे एंथ्रोपॉलॉजी का। मैंने कभी नहीं कहा कि आर्यन इन्वेजन, मैं दोनों बात कहता हूँ कि इन्वेजन भी था और साथ में दूसरी थ्योरी ये भी है।
हम ये लिखेंगे कि दो थ्योरीज,
बिल्कुल, दैट्स इट, हमारा काम हो गया। मैंने कहा ना कि मैंने पहले लेक्चर में कहा था कि देयर आर सम ओपन एंडिंग क्वेश्चंस, देयर इज नो कंक्लूजन फॉर दैट, so we can conclude it in a different manner that we'll learn over the period, like how to conclude these kind of thing. So उन पे मत फंसे और किसी से कभी बहस भी मत करिए कि नहीं यार ऐसा था। हाँ
सर, एक बार बस ऐसी बात हो रही थी तो उसने ये चीज बताई,
हाँ ठीक है,
कि हमारे इसमें बिल्कुल ही वैलिड नहीं है, दैट्स व्हाई।
ऐसा हो ही नहीं, कोई डिसिप्लिन कभी ऐसी बात ही नहीं कहता कि वैलिड ही नहीं है। कौन है वो?
हुआ ही नहीं था ऐसा, मतलब हमें पढ़ाया
Who, like who all are they, like who can claim it? It is precisely a history subject, history topic. So of course historians are yet debating on this. So they are various argument. और दुनिया में कोई ऐसा डिसिप्लिन नहीं है जो कहता है यही सच है। साइंसेस भी नहीं कहता ऐसा, नहीं वो, हाँ साइंस में भी एक पॉइंट पे जाके वो लोग मान लेते हैं कि यार इसके आगे का नहीं पता है ना, तो फिर ये कहना तो गलत है। और नॉलेज कभी भी नहीं हो सकती। मैं तो आज भी अगर कोई बच्चे सवाल खड़े कर देते कि सर ये गलत लग रहा है, तो मैं बोलता हूँ कल चेक करके बताऊँगा, एब्स्ट्रैक्ट नहीं हो सकता कभी, है ना। ओके, कैनोनिकल एंड नॉन कैनोनिकल। कैनोनिकल में जो है इट्स द थ्री पिटकस, and then the except three pitkas, whatsoever literature you know, they are ultimately falling in which category? Non-canonical. Clarity है यहाँ पे, correct? अच्छा, there is another thing that you should be very categorical of, right? That canonical literature is written in the Pali and the Prakrit, correct? And only the canonical literatures were written in Pali and Prakrit. Rest literature you find in some other languages being written. So in case of India, it was the language which is used, that's called as either Sanskrit or else hybrid, correct? And in some other cases such as Singli or the Sri Lankan script was also used for writing it, such as Divyavadan, Mahavadan and so on, right? So Buddhist texts can be divided into these two parts. Now why am I telling you? Whenever you have been dealing with Buddhist sources, Buddhist text or literature as a source of history, in the introduction itself you will make it very clear. And you can't treat all of them similar or equal. They are having different sort of different sort of uses in history writing, but then this information must be cleared by you in the in the introduction itself. You should be very categorical while using them, because the moment you talk about this, there is more authenticity of this text. The moment you reach to this particular part, now the authenticity or the validity is getting down here, and that's how they are somehow becoming problematic, correct? So that's why I did tell you. Okay, fine, come back to the part. So now this is that thing. Now what sort of information that we have been getting? So political history, that's the first part. I think no text can be better than the Buddhist text in order to know about them. Why? Because there was one important thing happening parallelly, that is the state formation, Mahajanpada period. And since most of the either Buddha himself or Mahavir himself, or let's say even the rest of the disciples of Buddha, they were closely associated with states, the rulers. And that's why they are giving very appropriate information, or the more reliable information, more valid information, right? That's the utility of this. Such as the best example for this is Jataka. Jataka more or less has discussed about all the Mahajanpadas, खासकर जो यूपी वाले रीजन में है. And he is not Jataka is not giving information कि okay there was just one kingdom or one Mahajanpada, it's talking about the rulers, the various episodes of the stories or the anecdotes regarding them, and that's how they are the best text for the political history. There is another set of text which is very information, that's the Singli text, right? So when it comes to Asoka, I think you must have read somewhere for knowing about Asoka, undoubtedly they are the valuable text. In fact, not only the modern period, even the post-modern period is well known to us because of them, because that whole concept of Brahminical revivalism that probably I was discussing in the last class, that we come across through this particular text, right? So in Deep Vansa, Mahavansa, then Divyavadan is not written here, that's also part of it. So we can say yes, these texts are there. And then there is in the non-canonical category we can talk about the Milindipana, okay? So the questions of the Milind, right, that's Nag Sen and all. So that's how we can say yes, we do get some political information, right? एक चीज याद रखिएगा, कुछ लोग आंसर लिखते समय क्या करते हैं, दे मेक दिस एज पॉइंट, दीज आर ओनली एग्जाम्पल्स, point is this only. Be very particular about that. Now maybe within polity, like you want to convey some more points, in that case the polity point can be divided into further some sub points, but then these are examples, but then यहाँ पे ऐसी possibility नहीं है. So I think उसको बहुत clarity रखिए. Economic history. Now undoubtedly they are providing very good information on the economic history, and the reason is very simple. Do you know why? Because the Buddhists, like monks, had been mostly traveling with the travelers, or let's say monks, traders, and that's how they knew them better. So I think no information can be better than this, like the way they had been providing information on the traders, the guilds, and so on. Maximum information that we do collect on the guilds, that's coming from the Buddhist text only. That whatsoever rights they had been enjoying, the privileges and the various duties and so on, right? So that we do get from this. So undoubtedly the economic information, a lot we get from the Buddhist text, such as Milind Pano discusses the trade routes and the economic exchanges. Yes, routes are very important. You know about the Uttarapat, Dakshinapat, and then there were so many auxiliary routes and all, right? So they have been discussed here. So Gandhara, Central Asia, बहुत extensive discussion है इसमें, मैं अब क्या ही बोलूँ, बहुत कुछ मिलता है हमें, और बहुत सारी चीज़ें, बैंकिंग सिस्टम मिलता है, मनी लैंडिंग मिलता है. So there are several things of economy. Agriculture के ऊपर बहुत you can find good amount of discussion. So they are giving information more or less on every aspect. So trade and commerce, agriculture is missing here, but then you can include agriculture. Then urban development. So all these informations that we have been getting from here. Okay, fine. Then the social history. Now undoubtedly this is considered to be a better text giving us insight on the social history. Why? Because I have already told you the Brahminical text is giving a sort of ideal version. The Buddhist text must be giving the practical version, because they had been somehow exposing all these problems which were there in the text. Exactly, correct. तो ये लोग जो है जैसे सोशल स्ट्रक्चर क्या है, खासकर वर्ना को लेके, आई थिंक इनका जो इंटरप्रिटेशन है या इनकी जो डेफिनेशन है उसको हम थोड़ा सही मानते हैं, करेक्ट मानते हैं, ठीक है. ऐसे ही वुमेन को लेके जैसे थेरी गाथा में जिस तरीके से रेफरेंसेस हैं, तो दीज आर द वेरियस इन्फॉर्मेशन ऑफ द सोसाइटी दैट वी डू गेट. सो मेनली द डिवीजन इन द सोसाइटी में एक चीज़ आप हमेशा याद रखिए कि व्हेनेवर इट कम्स टू एनी क्वेश्चन, whenever it comes to society, there are few things that you should keep in mind. Society में क्या होता है, ठीक है? What is the nature of society? That's one important information. Though we'll discuss it later also. Nature मतलब whether it is a state society, it's a tribal society, is a kin society. These are the various terminologies that could be used, right? Any sort of division, or let's say any hierarchy is there in the society, that should be discussed, ठीक है? Status of woman, this is another important information. So whenever it comes to society, these are the important things, and in fact more or less every sort of information that we do get. Undoubtedly it's ultimately a religious text, so it's talking about the religious text also, ठीक है, religious sort of thing. So it is giving us information about the condition of Brahmanism, the problems with Brahmanism, expansion of Buddhism, and so on, correct. Now it also gives us a very good information about the linguistic development in India. It does talk about all sort of linguistic development which is there, right? मतलब खासकर पाली, प्राकृत and ये सारी Brahmi script, so उसके बारे में. Now shortcomings, correct. Here I would like to tell you a few things that that you listen very carefully. Whatsoever problems which were there with the Brahminical text, they are not here. Are they very conscious about the time? Yes, they are. Are they conscious about authorship? Yes, they are. ठीक है. So majority of the problems which were there with the Brahminical text, unfortunately they do not continue with the Buddhist text. That is the beauty of this text. So this question may be asked that how far you consider that Buddhist texts are better sources of history than the Brahminical text. So you have to show that these lacunas are there in the Brahminical text and they are not there with the Buddhist text. But then that does not mean that the problems are and the limitations are not there, right? So undoubtedly limitations are there. Ultimately it is also religious and normative in nature. Religious that you understand. Normative matlab it is giving you a sort of guideline that how to lead the life. Ultimately that's called as normative. मतलब जैसे prescription लिख के डॉक्टर देते ना ये करो वैसा ही लोग बताते हैं. So that is norm. Chronological ambiguity तो यहाँ पे भी है. एकदम बहुत clearly follow नहीं करते. ठीक है. Then we can talk about sectarian biases. That's also one problem. Ultimately they at every point of time they were trying to prove Buddhism as the important one. There are some important historians, they have been talking about it, such as Rice Davis, right? So he talks about the historical authenticity of the Pali Canon, reliable source for the early Buddhist history. George Sofen, right? Sopen. So he critiqued the historical reliability of Buddhist texts, advocating for the use of archaeological evidence to corroborate literary sources. Okay. Then it comes to Alexander Vine, suggests that despite their religious nature, Buddhist texts contain historically valuable information. And Richard Gombrich, he emphasized the importance of the Pali Canon in understanding the historical context of Buddhism and its development. दो तीन के नाम भी हमें बाद में conclude करते समय use कर लेना है. That's it, हमारा काम हो गया. That's all about the Buddhist literature. So that's how we are just done with the what sort of part, right? The literary sources. Maximum हम इतना ही कर सकते थे. मुझे नहीं लगा कि मैंने कोई भी पार्ट छोड़ा है, मैंने सारा कवर कर दिया इस पर. ठीक है. ओके, कमिंग टू द, ये बहुत आसान है यार, इसमें कुछ ऐसा नया करने के लिए नहीं है. आप सब पढ़ के आए, थोड़ा रफली देख लेते हैं फटाफट. ठीक है, उसको देख लेते हैं. नाउ इंस्क्रिप्शन स्ट्रक्चर द सेम वी आर गोइंग टू फॉलो. नाउ वन मोर थिंग, let's say any question is coming on the inscription, like how to start the answer with a definition. You'll be defining what is inscription and what is the branch of knowledge which is used for it, that is epigraphy. ये सब लिख देना है. And then what is the third thing? You need to write certain examples. That's it, we are done. So basically that's how you are going to write about it. Okay, political history. Now what information they do carry? Now political history, correct. अब यहाँ पे मैंने since I had to confine it but then you all understand कि when they are conveying the political information, they do talk about multiple things, such as in case of polity, what are the various points that we can include. Let's say I'm just talking about the inscription. Polity, right? थोड़ा logically सोचिए आप, क्या बताता है ये? That tells us about the extent of the kingdom. Example अगर मैं पूछूंगा क्या देंगे आप? Ashokas. It is present in the Deccan. That proves कि like South India was also under his control. Correct. What is next? It tells us about the dynasty. अगर आपको हर रूलर का जो है टाइम के साथ वो मिल गया, जो है इंस्क्रिप्शंस मिल गए, आई थिंक नथिंग बेस्ट लाइक यू नीड ओके डायनेस्टी. देन द प्रिंसिपल और लेट्स से द पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी in which theory they have been believing, such as when it comes to Kusanas, they believed in the decentralized theory. When it comes to Ashokas, he believed in the welfaristic policies. So everybody had a sort of policy for the kingship. Right. So what theory they had been believing, such as Guptas were believing in the divinity. Even the Kusanas were also believing in the divine theory of kingship. So the theory of kingship, right? You can even write it as a theory of kingship, right? That's also being conveyed here. So yes, we even come across this also, correct? And then I can say कि apart from that, we can say the individual, we can get the information on rulers, individual rulers basically, correct na? अब now individual was ruler के साथ, such as the wars, correct? Then the policies, such as a whole inscription is there, that is talking about the war between Pulkesin and Harsa. When it comes to policies, Ashokan inscription is telling us about the policy, such as land revenue relaxation, correct? That is one information we have been getting. So that's apart from that, we can write about one more thing. The information about the bureaucracy also we get sometimes, because Rajukas and all they are mentioned in Ashokan inscription. So that's how we can do, correct? एक्सपेंशन है तो इसमें समुद्रगुप्ता का इंस्क्रिप्शन दे दिया, आपको सब पता है, यहाँ पे मुझे बताने की जरूरत नहीं. तो मैंने इसको आप अगर सिर्फ इस डायमेंशन पे भी क्वेश्चन आ जाता है, so that can be elaborated further. You have multiple number of points which can be given there, since I had to confine it shorter, that's why I have done it. So political information, I hope you got it. Yeah, there's something what I had been missing that's very important, the administration, specifically the local self government, that what we come across from the Uttar Meru inscription. बहुत important information, आप खुद भी समझ आता होगा, तो आपको फिट करना है. हमेशा अपनी स्पेशलिटी वहाँ दिखानी, यही सब प्रैक्टिस से आती है, ताकि जैसे अभी मैं आई वाज स्किपिंग इट बट देन इट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, थैंकफुली इट इज़ देयर, ठीक है। तो आपको याद रखना है कि कुछ चीज़ें जो है बड़ी खास है, दैट यू डेफिनेटली नीड टू इनकॉर्पोरेट इन योर आंसर, सो इवैल्यूएटर वुड बी हैप्पी। नाउ इट कम्स टू इकोनॉमिक इन्फॉर्मेशन, ठीक है। इंस्क्रिप्शंस आर इवन वैल्यूएबल फॉर द इकोनॉमिक इन्फॉर्मेशन, राइट। सो देयर आर मल्टीपल रीजंस। सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी कैन टॉक अबाउट द लैंड ग्रांट्स, correct. So I think whatsoever history we understand of the early medieval period, it is precisely based on land grants, the charters, the copper plates, the whole theory of feudalism, the whole theory of like an integrative model. Ultimately, they all are based on these land donation charters, correct. So I hope, and in fact it does tell us about the various sort of rights, privileges, the systems, the expansion of the society and so on. So it's very important information that we do get. Apart from that, trade and commerce, so inscriptions were sometimes being issued even by the guilds and all. Mansard inscriptions such as it's giving us information about this also. Guilds के बारे में भी information हमें मिलती है, right? So this information that we do get, ठीक है. And in fact it is giving us information about the land revenue which is missing here, ठीक है. Land revenue के बारे में भी हमें information देता है, जैसे अभी हम अशोक वाला inscription discuss कर रहे थे ना, तो it is giving us information. एक और चीज़ आप इसमें discuss कर सकते हैं, irrigation, जैसे when it comes to the Junagadh inscription which is giving us information about the irrigation network. So मैंने वही बोला, कुछ कुछ पॉइंट्स कभी कभी मिसिंग होते हैं तो वो कॉम्पनसेट करना है इसके से, हाँ है ना, जूनागढ़, अच्छा राइट। यहाँ पे एग्रीकल्चर को लेके एक अलग से पॉइंट होना चाहिए था, एग्रीकल्चर और इरिगेशन को लेके, करेक्ट, फाइन। हाँ रोमिन देवी में भी, करेक्ट करेक्ट करेक्ट, रोमिन देवी अशोका वाला, करेक्ट, फाइन। या व्हेन इट कम्स टू द सोशल इंफॉर्मेशन, undoubtedly you can understand कि inscriptions they were issued mostly by the rulers or sometimes by the guilds, and that's why it must be providing lesser information on society. So political और economy के लिए तो सबसे बेस्ट है ये, ठीक है, लेकिन society के लिए उतना अच्छा नहीं, फिर भी कुछ indirect information हमें मिल जाता है, such as certain inscriptions which are telling us about the land donations, the Aryan inscription which is talking about sati. So some some passing references are there, some random references are there. So that's how we do find it. Sometimes we do find the construction of stupas and patronage of art and culture by these rulers. So this is one aspect that we do get, right? So that's also one part. Then religious history, I hope you can understand, whenever they had been patronizing something, some inscriptions were there. So that is helping us to do so, right? So this is how we can say that they are helping us. And then yes, another very important information, that's the linguistic development. I think the inscriptions are the best source to know about the linguistic development in India. So एकदम categorically बताता है कि पहले जो है वो है पाली है, प्राकृत है, फिर संस्कृत रिप्लेस करती है, फिर रीजनल लैंग्वेजेस आती है, तो उससे बेहतर कुछ नहीं हो सकता. So that's the best source to know about it. Yeah, that's all. Shortcomings क्या है? Of course, there are so many shortcomings that we can discuss. Selective content. There is very limited content. And I hope you can imagine that on the basis of that content, the whole history cannot be written. So that's important. Then it comes to examples such as Allahabad player processing. Then fragmentary evidences, they are never giving the things in a narrative, in such a way that the whole narrative is being discussed. It is always fragmented. Biased and exaggeration, that's the most problematic part of it. Undoubtedly, when I am sponsoring something, so I won't write anything negative against me. It's always exaggeration. They are full of it, and sometimes they are contradictory information. Such as if you read Banu Bhatt's book Harsa Charit, so he says that Harsa defeated him. On the other hand, a whole inscription is saying this fellow was defeated. In the same way, we can say that Pulkesin II was most probably defeated by one of the Pallava rulers, right? But on the other hand, Pulkesin is writing that he has defeated the Pallava ruler. But when he'll read his inscription, he is writing something else. So these confusions or conflicting statements are always there. So that you should. Pulkesin II. अच्छा यहाँ गलत है क्या? Pulkesin II. सेकेंड है, उसको चेंज कर लीजिएगा, हो जाती है कभी गलती, ठीक है, ओके. इंपॉर्टेंट व्यूज ऑफ स्कॉलर्स, बस उसमें कुछ ऐसा नहीं है, सो उसी को करते हैं. डीसी सरकार रिकॉग्नाइज द इंपॉर्टेंस ऑफ इंस्क्रिप्शंस इन रिकंस्ट्रक्टिंग एंशिएंट इंडियन हिस्ट्री एंड एम्फेसाइज्ड देयर रोल इन प्रोवाइडिंग chronological framework, right? Romila Thapar highlighted the need for critical analysis of inscriptions to understand their context and avoid taking them at face value. Richard Salomon, right? So noted the linguistic significance of inscriptions in understanding the development of ancient Indian. तीन है बस बहुत तीन अलग-अलग dimensions पे बात करते हैं. Okay, moving to the last, I guess. नहीं अभी foreign accounts है. ठीक है. Coins as source of history. Correct. Now when it comes to the coins as source of history, so again there is a longer list of the coins that we do find from the various year. So again you'll be defining that from which particular period the coins were introduced in India in the introduction. What is the branch of knowledge which is used for studying the coins, thus numismatic. ये सारी चीज़ें आप introduction में लिख देंगे कि it started from this particular Mahajanpada period, the Panchmark coins, and then further development, and then the numismatic. ठीक है. Now again, what sort of information that we do get? Again we find similar information what I have just now discussed for that one. I mean to say किसकी बात करें? Inscription, right? Inscription में जिस तरीके से we had been discussing about the extent, right? We do know if the Kusana coins are found in Varanasi, it means it was part of it, right? Apart from that, we can find the dynastic history because every ruler had been minting their own coins, and that's how we do know a very good chronological history of this. So that is also something which is there. So these are their religious orientation, because on the other side of the coin, specifically after the postmodern period, we start finding these kind of information. So that's also there. So these are certain information which are there. That's the significance of it. So political history, undoubtedly. Okay, then it comes to economic history. I think that's the best source for knowing about the economic history. Though they do not reveal anything by their own. ऐसा नहीं कि coins आके जैसे coins से inscription खुद ही आके बोलना शुरू कर देते हैं. Of course, they are not telling us anything, but then we have to extract the information from here. That's the significance of it. So they do talk about the trade and commerce. They do talk about the monetary system. They do talk about the land revenue system. So they are giving highlight on various things. They are telling us about all these things. So that's how for that it remains very good information. Okay. Then it comes to social and cultural history. Again, it's least concern about the society and culture, right? बहुत ज़्यादा बात नहीं करेंगे. But then sometimes we extract information indirectly from it, such as the whole idea of feudalism is based on basically the land charters, and the second thing is the missing of coins or the absence of coins. So we can't say that it is not providing us any information. It is providing us indirectly information, but it's giving us. ठीक है. Now coming to the shortcomings. So shortcomings इसकी क्या है? Shortcomings सबसे बड़ी बात बहुत limited information. Now what do you find? Nothing is written, and the best thing for historian is something where it is written, and that is that remains one of the biggest lacuna of Indian history. Why? Because in Indian history we can find that mostly the writings or the things are based on what? They are based on the written sources. Because it's very tough to use the archaeological sources. So this question may be also asked to you sometime, that why Indian history is majorly based on the literary sources, right? So though archaeological sources are more reliable, but then this problem is that the archaeological sources are providing us very less information. Now this question has been also asked by UPSC once, when they asked this question, we have to let them speak, right? They do not speak by their own. ऐसा करके एक बार statement पूछा है उन लोगों ने UPSC ने. So basically they are not saying anything. You have to interpret it in multiple ways, and whenever it comes to this object and its interpretation, it can be interpreted in multiple ways, right? So that problem is there. So limited context is there, content is there. Some sort of biases can be also noticed, like for religion and for other things. Okay? So that is also one thing. Apart from that, fragmentary evidences, that is very much correct for this also. There is one more limitation you can write, that the coins were always reminted. That possibility was there of reminting. इसका बहुत बेहतर example है कि in the North India you do not find the Roman coins. In South India you do find the Roman coins. Why? Because in North India rulers had their own coins, and that's why they reminted the Roman coins. In South India, the Cholas and all, they were not having their own coins, and that's why they kept them in the circulation. That's proving that this is also one one problem with this. So these are certain problems. Okay. इसके important scholars Michael Michener है, ठीक है. So he emphasized the importance of coins in understanding the economic and cultural interaction between ancient civilizations. Joe Cribb highlights the role of coins in tracing the spread of culture and the religious influences across India. And then Osman Boperachi, ठीक है, noted the significance of the Indo-Greek coins in understanding the culture and the political dynamics of ancient India. ठीक है, ये बस references चाहिए, नाम लिखना है. Okay. Now we have to go to the foreign text. ठीक है? Now let's go to another category, that's the foreign literature. ठीक है? Now there might be many questions from this part. Before I come to that, let me tell you, when it comes to foreign text, even in the introductory session also, I did tell you that there is one category of the sources that is known as the Greek sources, right? And within the Greek sources, there's only one text which is very important. So either they can ask a general question on the Greek text, right? Or else they can ask, like, a sort of precisely a question on the Indica. That's number one. Then apart from that, there are some other texts which are very important. Among them, Chinese texts are there. There are two, like, scholars, or there were two travelers, not scholars, Fahian and Wensang. They are important here. And then it comes to like, Sri Lankan text, then the Tibetan text and the Nepali text. Right? But ठीक है, इसमें से अलग से क्वेश्चन आने की पॉसिबिलिटी नहीं है, आज तक नहीं पूछा है, हम मान के भी चलते हैं वो नहीं पूछेगा तो हम उस पर नहीं जाएंगे. ठीक है? When they are dealing with the, like, Greek text, ठीक है, so you should be very particular कि if it is in general on the Greek text, in that case you need to mention at least about the all other texts also, and while giving the examples you have to mention them also, correct? So while mentioning, such as, like, you will be writing about Herodotus, you will be writing about Strabo, you are talking about Nearchus, then Periplus of Erythraean, then Pliny, then Ptolemy, सबके बारे में mention करना. That is something that you have to keep in mind. So when it comes to the contribution of the Greek accounts, so undoubtedly it will be first, like, defining that what are the Greek texts. I have already told you that you will be talking about all of them. Now they also provide us information on various sort of things. Okay? So Herodotus was the first person who had been providing information. So long back, somewhere in 6th century, right, when the people from that side, they are coming to here and they are invading India, like, invading India, and they control the northwestern part of India, specifically that Sindh region. So that, like, some references are there. After that, that, like, there were certain rulers such as Xerxes is there, then Darius is there, they are coming, and in fact they have been, like, ruling over India for some period of time. So this is, like, the early sort of writings which are there on India, correct? So now they have been providing the various information such as the political and the military history, correct? Political history, so they have been talking about various wars such as Alexander is coming, then Battle of Hydaspes with Porus. That's being discussed over there, okay? And in fact, they have been also discussing some other things, that what is the revenue what they had been getting from this side. So these early references are there, like, in this particular text, okay? And then undoubtedly when it comes to like, the political information, Megasthenes is the best person, right, who has been writing about the Indian political system. So yeah, Indica's book is there. But here I would like to tell you something that's very important, that without the help of these Greek sources, we would not have reconstructed the history of Chandragupta Maurya and Bindusar, right? So in that regard, it remains very important. Why? Because only they have referred the name of Chandrakotas and Indrakotas. That was further recognized or realized by the historians that ultimately it is the Chandragupta. Then for for Bindusar also, they had been writing about Amitrochates, right? So that person was later on identified as Bindusar. So I hope you can, and in fact, like, there was one more thing that you should know, that there is no Indian text which is writing about Chandragupta Maurya. There is one text writing about Chandragupta Maurya, is the Mudra Rakshas, that was written somewhere in 6th century CE. So much after Chandragupta Maurya, like after 900, there is one book written which is dealing about Chandragupta Maurya. So I think you understand that what must be the authenticity of that book. So that's why I can say that they are very helpful. जिसमें Aryan है और ये सारे लोग हैं, they have been mentioning about Chandragupta Maurya and Bindusara. Okay, they even write about the governance. So Indica is the best source to know about this. The way they had been writing about, Indica is writing about the various bureaucracy, and then the city management or the city administration, and army management, and all these kind of, yeah, these are the things which are being discussed over here. Apart from that, he is providing us very good information on army, such as like horse, or या फिर elephant की क्या, horse तो नहीं, elephant की क्या significance है, military strategies and all, they are being discussed by them. So undoubtedly they are good source for the political and military history. Okay. Then it comes to like social and the cultural insight. So yes, specifically I won't say much about the other sources, but then Indica is providing us information on that. Indica बहुत सारी चीज़ें बताती Indian society के बारे में, the hierarchy in the society, status of women in the society, the various cities and all, right, the physical distance among the cities. So they have been providing various information, fairs, festivals, flora, fauna, all these information that we do get. So social and the cultural insight that we do get from the Megasthenes book, precisely I can say. Urban life is also being depicted by them, that you can keep here in the economic and the geographic information. Economic, yes, that for the trade, undoubtedly there is no parallel text which is providing us information on that. So they have been providing enormous information on the trade and commerce, the way it was there between the Greco-Roman Empire and India, what are the commodities being traded, what was the system of the trade routes and all, right? And specifically Periplus of Erythraean Sea and these books have been discussing about this. So routes, major ports, the good exchange between them, all these information that we do find in this text, right? Natural resources, what are the natural resources of India? That's also being discussed by them. Geographical insight, right? Strabo, Ptolemy, even Indica is also writing about the landscape of India, the topography of India, the climate, right? And all these things are being discussed. So in that regard also, it's important. Then cross-cultural interactions, okay? So philosophical exchange, it does talk about basically the exchange of the philosophies and all. Artistic influences about the Gandhara art and all these kind of things, right? They are being discussed here. So these are various sort of information that we do get from here. Okay? Now limitations. Okay? So limitations, there are many limitations with these sources. So ethnographic biases. Okay? Cultural misinterpretation. They at any point of time they could not understand the Indian culture, and that's why there were many wrong information being provided by them. That's the cultural interpretation. It's basically a problem with the Megasthenes. Why? Because as far as Indian society is being covered, it is the Megasthenes only, and that's why we find this a particular thing in this book. Exaggeration of the facts. So Greek accounts sometimes exaggerate or romanticize certain aspects of Indian life, such as claiming that Indians never locked their doors due to a lack of crime. So these kind of exaggerations that you find. So this is ethnographic biases. Reliance on the second-hand information. That's the very important dimension. Once a separate question has been asked, hearsay, that is the term that they have used. So basically, you should know one fact. Nobody among them has ever came to India except Megasthenes. So he came, the Nearchus, he came to the northwestern side of India. That's it. Rest all never came to India. So from how did they collect the information? So they had been collecting information basically from what? They had been collecting information from the traders mainly. The traders had been going back from here, and they had been asking from them, and then that's being compiled by them. So it is second-hand information. So whenever it is second-hand information, so it might be having so many problems. That's the greatest limitation of this. Exaggeration and the mythical elements. So such as there were so many mythical creatures are being discussed, the gold digging is being discussed. So वो सारी चीजें इंडिया में थी नहीं, but they have discussed about it. Romanticize the narratives, ठीक है? They talked about so many wonders and all, ठीक है? That is also one problem. Limited understanding of Indian society. Undoubtedly, they never had an observation-based information, right? They were mostly based on the secondary information, and that's how they are never correct. In fact, Megasthenes claims he has visited several parts of India. But then you should understand that he stayed here just for 3.5 years. And within 3.5 years, a person cannot travel from northeast to Madras. And he has been giving information for northeast also. He has been giving information for the Patliputra and even in the South India also. That is practically not possible. Being a court person, he always had limited access to the society. You understand that they are always confined in a particular place. And this is the reason because of what they are not very trustworthy. That's another limitation. So he talks about the 7-caste system, which is incorrect. He talks about the absence of slavery, which is incorrect. He talks about the absence of famine, which is incorrect. So there was several wrong information being provided by him. That's also one problem. There is one more problem that you should note down, right, which is not there here. First of all, there's a very important point. Why were they so much interested in India? Why there was so much writing on India? There is no one book known as Indica. There are multiple books which are known with the name of Indica. Why they were so much interested? Look, if we are having our relationship with the Mars, naturally we will be interested in Mars. And let's say if limitations are there, everybody cannot visit Mars. ठीक है, हर कोई एलन मस्क नहीं है अगर कि जब मर्जी हुआ मार्स पे चले गए, ठीक है, तो या फिर हम उस केस में क्या करेंगे? हम दूसरे से जैसे सपोज वो घूम के आए थे, उससे पूछेंगे अरे कैसे लोग हैं वहाँ पे. तो जब when you are willing to know about another land, so you would be always interested in some interesting facts. Correct ना? मैं अगर ये वाला वीडियो अभी जो है वो करूँ, मैं डालूँ कि जो है मैंने ये पढ़ाया इंडिका के बारे में, लोग नहीं इतना इंटरेस्ट लेंगे. मैं ये बताऊँ कि मेगास्थनीज के यार 4 हाथ थे, ठीक है, वो वीडियो वायरल हो जाएगा. समझ रहे हैं ना? आई होप यू गॉट द कॉन्टेक्स्ट. दे वर ऑलवेज इंटरेस्टेड इन नोइंग द इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट्स अबाउट इंडिया. ठीक है ना? ओके, फाइन. So yeah, I was just telling about this point कि they are always talking about the interesting fact. they are not the core concerns of historians. Okay? So this is also one limitation. These are certain limitations. These scholars are talking about like these foreign texts. A.L. Bossum, he talks about the need for critical analysis. Like so he simply says ki you can't accept the facts as it is. Romila Thapar is saying corroborating Greek accounts with the indigenous sources. That is what called as juxtaposition. What I had been discussing in the last class कि आप हर जो है आंसर कंक्लूड ऐसे ही करेंगे juxtaposition. The same thing he is saying, right? Then Thomas Trotman, again very important scholar for the Greek sources. I am telling you Thomas Trotman. ठीक है? Trotman highlights the role of Greek accounts in establishing timeline and understanding cross-cultural interactions while cautioning against accepting the narratives uncritically due to cultural biases. Vincent Arthur Smith, he talks about also a cultural approach, तो he glorifies कि नहीं यार अच्छा information देते हैं, but साथ में cross इसकी बात करता है. That's all about this sources. Okay fine. Now Indica, हम पार्सली बात कर चुके हैं इंडिया के बारे में, वही सारी चीज़ें. He is also providing more or less the similar information. ठीक है. So when it comes to political information, so he talks about king's role, bureaucracy, administration, the various bureaucrats, military organization, the city management and so on. So these are various political information. Then social and cultural, हम पहले ही बात कर चुके हैं, what sort of information he had been providing. Then it comes to economic and the geographic information, information. So he talks about the flora, fauna, agriculture, trade and everything. So undoubtedly this is the best part of like this person. In fact, he has even provided us the physical distance between the cities in India. So of course that's a great information that he has been providing. Okay, cultural and the religious observation. So he has like even studied the Indian society, culture also, the religious perspective, and he had made this comparison, such as he has been comparing the Greek gods such as Krishna to Heracles, right, or a Shiva to Dionysius. So basically these kind of cross parallels have been also established by them. Or of course these are the like thing. Bias. क्या ये कृष्णा कल्ट तो लोकल कल्ट की तरह तो है ना, लोकल कल्ट तो है. Heracles. Limitations, the same limitations what we have discussed. ठीक है, even the historians are also same because they are the same people there. Okay. Now the Chinese sources, right? So among the Chinese sources, like there are two, as I did tell you. Now when you have been writing the introduction, these use these kind of words like Fogoji, क्या है? Fogoji, right? That is the name of his travelogue, right? So अगर ऐसे वर्ड्स का इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो थोड़ा सा इम्प्रेशन पड़ता है यार कि ठीक है, तो आप कोशिश करिए थोड़ा. मैंने बार बार कहा सेंचुरीज आप हमेशा मेंशन करिए किस सेंचुरीज में है. इनफैक्ट यू कैन इवन मेंशन दैट ड्यूरिंग विच पर्टिकुलर रूलर ही हैड बीन कमिंग टू इंडिया. ठीक है, सो ये सारी चीज़ें इन्फॉर्मेशन उसके इंट्रोडक्शन में होगी. अभी कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन क्या है, लाइक दे हैड बीन प्रोवाइडिंग अस इन्फॉर्मेशन ऑन वेरियस थिंग. सो सिंस दे वर द अल्टीमेटली पिलग्रिम्स and that's where their main focus remain on the religion. When it comes to the status of Buddhism in various parts of India, best information to know, like best book to know about that. So Buddhist practices, like where the monasteries were there, like where exactly Buddhists, like वो जहाँ से travel करता है, he is telling that what is the status of Buddhism in these places. So religious information, social and cultural observation. So yes, he is writing about the caste system, the hierarchy in the society, the four varnas, क्राइम एंड पनिशमेंट, लाइक देयर लाइक ही हैज़ बिन थोड़ा बढ़ा चढ़ा के भी लिखते हैं कि इंडिया में यार है नहीं क्राइम नहीं है, ये सब लिखते हैं. और कैसे लिखेंगे, वो सोचो कि वो लोग एक ऐसी जगह से आ रहे हैं जहाँ पे उनके इष्ट देवता जो है यहाँ से बिलोंग करते हैं, तो जाहिर सी बात है उस लैंड को थोड़ा ग्लोरीफाई करके दिखाएंगे ना कि देखो यार वो लैंड ऑफ बुद्धा है. सो दैट्स व्हाई दीज प्रॉब्लम्स आर नॉट देयर. तो ये सब लिमिटेशंस भी मैं बता रहा हूँ साथ में इसके. ठीक है, इकोनॉमिक एंड द पॉलिटिकल ऑब्जर्वेशन, अगेन इट इज़ नॉट वेरी ट्रस्टवर्दी. व्हाई? बिकॉज दे हैड नथिंग टू डू विद द political things. ठीक है, they were least concerned about that. Why they are like writing about them? Because sometimes they are coming into close connections, and that's why they were just knowing about the things. ठीक है, but then they never had a good understanding of this. So though they had been writing about these things, administration के बारे में बात करते हैं, infrastructure के बारे में बात करते हैं, trade, agriculture, but then of course they are very less reliable information. And then influence on Chinese Buddhism. This is a very interesting aspect that they had been discussing. कि how come the Indian Buddhism was impacting on Chinese Buddhism? So for understanding the status of Buddhism in China, I think that's a very interesting that. Okay. Limitations. I think again it's very simple, Buddhist centric view. ठीक है? So I think like the way they were, first of all they were very selective, right? And then the biases are there. That's one important information. Limited political information, that's also quite obvious. I have already discussed. Ethnocentric perspective. So cultural misunderstanding, that's also had to happen. That's very important, normal. Geographical and temporal limitations. Why? Because wherever they have been visiting, they found them as India, right? So that's why it is not very important. Some limitations are there, and that is something you need to keep in mind, right? इसमें रोमिला थापर है और वो बात करते हैं कि she is talking about the detailed observation on Buddhism and its influence on Indian society. Needs to contextualize his work within the broader historical and cultural framework, but then she is limiting it here only. A.L. Bossum, he considers Fayan's travelogue as a valuable source of understanding the socio-religious landscape of Gupta India. He notes that while Fayan provides unique insight into the monastic life, that's a very important thing. Tansen Sen, he is the person who has precisely studied this only, right? A recent scholar. So he highlights Fayan's role in facilitating cultural exchange between India and China. But then he hunts that dimension, what a point I had been discussing towards the end. कि ये क्या करते हैं. That's about Fayan. Now when it comes to Wensang, again things are not very different. Same चीजें हैं वैसे ही, ठीक है. Detail of geography and polity. So as I told you, comprehensive coverage of Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Kashmir, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal and South India. Political landscape, हरसा से connected है तो थोड़ा बेहतर information देते हैं. In fact, you know about that Prayag conference, religious conference. Yeah, that's why he has been providing a better information. But yet I must say that he was not having a very good idea of the Harsa's kingdom, right? Documentation of the cities and monasteries. That's a good information that he has been providing. Okay. Then religious and the cultural observation. So he is talking about all these universities and all. That's a great thing that he has been providing. Contribution to Chinese and Indian relations, right? So basically this kind of relationship which is there. The same limitations are there, religious bias by ethnographic perspective, temporal and geographic limitations, ये सारे informations है. वही सारे scholars है, same sort of statements are also being said by them, right? So that's all about the religious information, correct? Oh, sorry, the sources. So we have just done with the sources. Now there was a second part of this session is left, right? So there we have to discuss about basically the PYQs, right? So you have been already provided, but then we have to also discuss about structuring and then how to understand the questions and all. थोड़ा समझ रहा है कि कैसे चीज़ें आंसर्स आपको हमने प्रोवाइड कर दिया है, but then we'll be discussing most of the questions that have come. So in the next session, which is there in tomorrow only, right? So tomorrow we'll start with this. So in first hour we'll try to finish this, and then we'll go to the some probable questions, and after that we'll enter into that. If we are not able to finish that topic tomorrow, in that case on Sunday we might have an extra class and we'll finish it. ठीक है. So कोशिश करेंगे कि हर वीक का टारगेट हम उसी वीक में खत्म करें. एक क्लास अगर ज़्यादा हो गया हम कर लेंगे, कोई इशू नहीं है. So instead of 3 we'll be having 4 classes, but we'll try to finish it. Okay. So see you tomorrow then, same time.